You still live in that dump, Dad? Seriously? Those words cut deeper than a winter wind through the streets of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. My son, Brandon, leaned against the doorway of my one-bedroom apartment, smirking like he had just delivered a joke. Behind him, my daughter Melissa snickered, her freshly manicured nails tapping on her phone like she was already texting the insult to someone else. The faint smell of burnt coffee hung in the air from the old percolator I'd had for years. The carpet under their expensive shoes was worn thin, patches frayed from decades of use. They didn't see the years of sacrifice inside these four walls. Just the peeling paint, the creaky pipes, the kind of place their father had been reduced to after giving them everything. I forced a smile, swallowing the sharp sting in my chest. "It's home," I said softly. "Home?" Brandon scoffed, running his eyes over the tiny living room. "This looks like something out of a college dorm. You know, for someone who worked 30 years at the mill, I expected you'd have more to show for it." Melissa chimed in, her tone sharper than the diamond on her ring. "It's embarrassing, Dad. Honestly, you should have planned better. Look at us. We've got investments, cars, a lifestyle. And you, well, you've got this." Their words piled on like bricks, heavy and suffocating. They didn't know the full story. They didn't know about the late nights, the double shifts, the savings drained to put them through school. They didn't know what I still held in my back pocket, something I had never revealed, not even when their mother left years ago. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. I sat quietly, my fingers tracing the chipped edge of the coffee table I'd bought the year Melissa was born. They thought they were mocking an old man who had nothing left. But deep down, I knew something they didn't. You see, while they flaunted their success, their shiny houses and leased cars, there was a truth hidden in black and white paperwork sitting in my desk drawer. A truth that had the power to flip their world upside down. I didn't say a word as they left, Brandon's laughter echoing down the hall. But inside me, something stirred. A quiet storm. They thought I was beaten. They thought I was powerless. But what they didn't know was that I was still the landlord of their precious mansion. The next weekend, I found myself sitting alone at the Main Street Diner in Cedar Rapids. The smell of bacon grease and fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the soft chatter of farmers and old mill workers who gathered there every Saturday. It was the same diner I used to take Brandon and Melissa to when they were kids, back when a pancake breakfast could make them laugh for hours. Now, they barely had time for me unless it was to mock my apartment or ask about money. "Morning, Tom," said Marge, the waitress who'd been serving here for 30 years. She set down a steaming mug in front of me. "Haven't seen your kids in here with you lately," I chuckled, though it wasn't a happy sound. "They're too busy in their big houses, Marge." She gave me that knowing look only small-town folks could. "Big houses don't always mean big hearts." Her words lingered as I stirred sugar into my coffee. Later that day, I drove past Brandon's house in the Oakwood subdivision. A massive place with stone columns, polished landscaping, and a circular driveway. Out front, his new black Escalade sparkled in the sunlight. I slowed down, my old Chevy pickup rattling as it passed. Through the window, I saw Brandon stepping onto the porch, yelling at a landscaper. Melissa pulled up in her white Lexus, sunglasses perched on her nose. They looked every bit like the successful, polished adults they wanted the world to see. But I couldn't help thinking, that land, that very house they bragged about, was tied to me. My name was still in the courthouse records, filed years ago when I bought up a few parcels cheap after the mill strikes. Land nobody wanted back then. Land that was worth millions now. Back at my apartment, I pulled open the drawer of my old oak desk. Inside lay the folder, yellowed edges, papers neatly stacked. The original deed. Their mansion sat on land they didn't truly own. They thought they were landlords of me, mocking where I lived. But the truth was reversed. Still, I didn't rush. Revenge has to be brewed slow, like coffee in a percolator. That night, Brandon called. His voice carried that sharp, condescending tone he always used lately. "Dad, listen. Melissa and I talked, and we think you should sell whatever little savings you've got left and move into assisted living. It's better for everyone. You don't belong in that rundown place anymore." I clenched the phone, my jaw tight. "And what if I like where I am?" "Dad, come on. Don't be stubborn. You're not getting any younger. We're looking out for you." Melissa's voice piped up in the background, loud enough for me to hear. "Honestly, Brandon, he's just being selfish. He should have handed things over to us already." Handed things over. They had no idea what they were asking for. I forced a calm breath. "We'll talk about it," I said, before hanging up. As I set the receiver down, I looked again at the folder on my desk. My fingers brushed the embossed seal from the county clerk's office. The storm inside me was no longer quiet. If they wanted to treat me like an old fool, then maybe it was time to remind them who really held the keys to their kingdom. And soon, the entire town would know the truth. A few days later, I walked into the county courthouse, the place I hadn't stepped foot in for nearly 15 years. The marble floors echoed under my boots, the sound sharp against the quiet hum of the building. I knew exactly where I needed to go. The records office, tucked in the back, where property deeds and land titles were kept, like secrets waiting to be unearthed. The clerk, a younger guy with glasses slipping down his nose, looked up. "Can I help you, sir?" I slid the folder across the counter. "I just want to confirm this deed is still valid." He unfolded the papers, his eyes scanning the lines. A slow whistle escaped his lips. "This is old, but yeah, looks like you've been paying the taxes all these years. That means it's still yours, sir." That word, yours, hit me like a spark. All the sacrifices, the ridicule, the loneliness of those long nights after their mother left. It hadn't been for nothing. I leaned in closer. "So technically the house on that land?" "Still falls under your ownership of the lot," he said with a shrug. "They may own the structure, but you own the ground it stands on. Which means, legally, you've got leverage. Leverage." I walked out into the autumn air, the courthouse steps creaking beneath me. For the first time in years, I felt taller, stronger, like the weight of their insults had turned into a weapon in my hands. That evening, Brandon stopped by again. He didn't knock. He barged right in, like my apartment was nothing more than a waiting room. Melissa trailed behind, scrolling through her phone. "Dad, we need to talk numbers," Brandon said. He sat down, spreading out some papers. "Melissa and I have been carrying a lot of expenses with the house, and, frankly, you're not contributing. You should think about transferring what you do have into our names. It'll make things easier when, well, you know, when you're gone." My chest tightened, but I kept my face calm. "You think I'm a burden?" Brandon raised his hands. "Don't take it like that. It's just practical. You can't handle this stuff anymore." "Let us," Melissa added with a laugh. "Besides, Dad, you don't even understand real estate." "It's complicated. We'll handle it." If only they knew. I let them finish their little speech, nodding quietly. Then I leaned back in my chair, my hands folded. "You two sure seem confident in your house," I said slowly. "Of course," Brandon said, puffing his chest. "It's our biggest asset," Melissa smirked. "It's our future." That's when I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. "Well," I said, "the future has a funny way of changing." They exchanged confused looks, but I didn't explain. Not yet. That night I sat at my desk under the dim glow of the old lamp, pen in hand. I drafted a letter to my lawyer, to the bank, to the county office. Piece by piece, I began moving my quiet ownership into play. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect. It was about reminding my children that the man they mocked still had fire left in him. And soon, everyone in Cedar Rapids would see it too. 2 weeks later, I received an invitation to Melissa's birthday dinner. It wasn't out of love, it was obligation. She wanted to show off her new kitchen, her polished granite counters, and the chandelier that dripped crystals like a stage light over her dining table. When I arrived, the house was full of people. Neighbors, family friends, even the pastor from First Baptist. Brandon strutted around like a king, shaking hands, showing off the wine cellar he didn't even know how to stock properly. Melissa floated from guest to guest, her laughter carrying through the halls like glass breaking. But I didn't come just to smile and nod. Tonight was the night. Dinner began with Melissa raising her glass. "To family," she said, eyes flicking toward me with the faintest smirk. "And to building something bigger and better with each generation." The table erupted in applause. I just sat quietly, sipping my water. Halfway through the meal, Brandon leaned across the table, his voice loud enough for the guests to hear. "So, Dad, when are you finally moving out of that shoebox? Melissa and I are thinking maybe we'll just sell it off after—" "You know." A ripple of awkward laughter moved around the table. My fork froze midair. For a moment, the humiliation burned hot in my chest. But then, just as quickly, calm washed over me. I set the fork down, dabbed the corner of my mouth with a napkin, and said, "Funny thing about houses. They only stand as strong as the ground beneath them." Melissa tilted her head. "What's that supposed to mean?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folded documents. The deed, the property tax receipts, the lawyer's notarized confirmation. I laid them flat in the center of the table, right on top of Melissa's designer table runner. Brandon frowned, picking up the papers. As his eyes scanned, the color drained from his face. What is this?" "It's the land your mansion sits on," I said, my voice calm and steady. "You may own the bricks, the windows, the shiny countertops. But the dirt beneath your feet? That's mine. Always has been." Gasps filled the room. The pastor leaned forward, whispering a prayer under his breath. Neighbors exchanged wide-eyed glances. Melissa snatched the papers from Brandon, flipping through them. "No, this can't be right. You paid for a house," I interrupted. "Not the land. Every year, I've paid the taxes. Every year, the county sent the bill to me. And now, you've been living like royalty on my property." The silence that followed was electric. You could hear the hum of the chandelier, the clink of someone's spoon dropping into their soup bowl. Brandon's voice cracked. "You can't do this. Our whole life is here." I leaned back in my chair, letting their panic spill across the table. "You thought I was some old fool in a dumpy apartment. But it turns out I've been your landlord all along," the guests whispered, some shaking their heads, others smirking at the poetic justice unfolding right in front of them. Melissa's eyes filled with tears, not the kind born of regret, but of fear. Fear of losing everything she flaunted. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel mocked. I felt powerful. But this was just the beginning. Because owning the dirt meant I held the shovel. And I could bury their pride with it. The fallout began almost immediately after that dinner. Word spread through Cedar Rapids faster than wildfire. In a town where everyone knew everyone, secrets didn't stay buried for long. And mine was no longer a secret. At the diner the next morning, heads turned as I walked in. Old Marge leaned across the counter with a grin. Well, Tom, seems the mighty Oakwood kids aren't as high and mighty anymore." I just smiled, sipping my coffee. For once, I wasn't the subject of pity. I was the subject of respect. Meanwhile, Brandon and Melissa scrambled. They stormed into my apartment the very next day, red-faced and frantic. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone," Melissa shouted, her voice breaking. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stayed seated in my armchair, calm as ever. I told the truth. Brandon tossed a stack of papers onto my coffee table. "Fine, Buy us out. Name your price. I looked him straight in the eye. It doesn't work that way. You live on my land, which means every decision you make goes through me. You want to remodel your kitchen? You'll need my approval. Want to refinance? My signature. You thought I was a burden, but I'm the foundation of your entire life. Their anger simmered into silence. For the first time, they had no comeback. Over the weeks that followed, the cracks in their perfect world began to show. Brandon's Escalade was repossessed after he missed payments. Melissa's shopping trips became fewer and fewer. The neighbors whispered. The church ladies gossiped. And the facade of wealth they had built crumbled like a sandcastle in the tide. And me? I kept paying the taxes, just as I always had. Quiet, steady, unshaken. Only now, I walked a little taller through town. People greeted me with nods of respect, not pity. One evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun dip low behind the buildings. For the first time in years, I felt peace. They had tried to strip me of dignity, to laugh at my tiny apartment, to write me off as an old fool. Instead, it was their pride, their greed, their arrogance that cost them everything. Justice didn't come with shouting. It came with a quiet truth, written in ink on a courthouse deed. I closed my eyes, the cool breeze brushing my face, and whispered to myself, they thought they owned the world. Turns out, they were just tenants in mine. Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.